What if the voice you long to hear the most is the one that tells you to stop calling? This isn't a story about neglect in the physical sense. It's about something far more piercing. When a child, the person you nurtured with every ounce of your love, decides you're no longer part of their life. She only wanted to hear her daughter's voice, but what she heard instead would break her heart and rebuild her in ways she never expected. The phone had become my companion. It sat on the kitchen counter, glowing whenever I pressed the screen, waiting like I was. I checked it too often. In the morning with my coffee, in the afternoon when the house was too quiet, at night before bed when loneliness crept in. Most days I didn't receive much. A scam call about car insurance, a wrong number, a reminder from the pharmacy. But sometimes, just sometimes, the name Anna lit up the screen. My daughter. It didn't matter if she only spoke for 2 minutes or 10. Hearing her voice filled the hollow spaces of the house. I'd ask about her job, about the weather in the city, about whether she was eating well. She'd answer quickly, sometimes distracted, sometimes annoyed, but I clung to every word. I didn't want much, not gifts, not visits every week, just a phone call, just a voice to remind me I hadn't been forgotten. So when days stretched into weeks without a call, I picked up the phone myself. The first time, she answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Mom," she said, breathless, clearly busy. "Can we talk later? I'm heading into a meeting." "Of course, sweetheart. Just wanted to hear your voice." The second time, she sounded irritated. "Mom, I told you, things are crazy here. I'll call you when I have time, okay?" I apologized, though I wasn't sure what for. "I didn't mean to bother you." The 3rd time it went straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway. "Hi, honey, it's just me." I tried again the next week. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed. I knew I shouldn't call too much, knew I was supposed to wait patiently, but the emptiness inside my home grew too loud to ignore. When Anna answered, her voice was sharper than I had ever heard it. "Mom, you have to stop calling me all the time. I have my own life now, do you understand? You can't keep doing this." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My throat closed, my chest ached. "All I wanted," I whispered, "was to hear your voice." But she had already hung up. The kitchen was quiet again, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I set the phone down carefully, as if it had suddenly become fragile glass. My hands shook. That night I sat by the window, staring at the empty street. I thought about all the nights I had rocked Anna to sleep when she was sick, all the mornings I had braided her hair before school, all the times I had stayed up late waiting for her to come home safe as a teenager. Every memory was filled with love, and now, love felt like a crime. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either. I just sat there, listening to the silence between rings, and in that silence, something inside me began to shift. I had heard my daughter cry before. I had heard her laugh, argue, whisper secrets into the phone with friends, sing off-key in the shower. Her voice had been the soundtrack of my life, but I had never heard her speak to me like that. "Stop calling me. I have my own life now." The words kept echoing in my head as if the walls of the house had memorized them and were determined to remind me. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea gone cold. The steam had faded, leaving nothing but a bitter taste. My hands were clasped together as if in prayer, but no words came. I tried to tell myself she was stressed, that she didn't mean it, that maybe. The next day, I went through my routine like a ghost. I made oatmeal, I watered the plants, I read the newspaper but didn't absorb a single word. At every small sound, the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of leaves outside, my heart leapt, thinking maybe it was the phone at last. It wasn't. When I walked past the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. A tired woman with gray streaks in her hair, shoulders bent slightly forward, eyes searching for something that wasn't there. I whispered to that reflection, "When did I become too much?" Because that was the truth, wasn't it? I had become too much for my own daughter, too many phone calls, too many reminders that I existed, too much weight pressing on a life she didn't want to carry. The thought hollowed me out. I remembered the years when she was little, how she used to run into the house shouting, "Mom!" as if I was the center of her universe, how she used to slip her hand into mine without thinking, trusting that I would always be there to guide her across the street. Now, she wanted distance, silence, space. And I was left holding the pieces of a role that had defined me for decades. Mother. By evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, the phone in my lap. I stared at it, debating. Should I call again? Should I risk another rejection? My thumb hovered over her name, my breath shallow. I imagined her sigh, the irritation in her voice, the sharp edge of her words. I set the phone down. That was the first time I didn't call. It felt like swallowing glass, sharp, painful, unnatural. But somewhere deep down, I knew I couldn't keep reaching for someone who didn't want to be reached. The house felt unbearably quiet. I turned on the television just for noise, but the voices blurred together, meaningless. I tried reading, but the words swam on the page. Even the plants seemed droopier, as if they too felt the weight of abandonment. When the clock struck midnight, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling. And then a memory surfaced, something my mother once told me when I was young. "Children grow up to leave you," she had said, folding laundry with tired hands. "The hard part is learning to live when they do." At the time, I had brushed it off. I couldn't imagine ever wanting to leave my own mother. I couldn't imagine love fading with years. Now, lying in bed with Emma's words echoing in my ears, I understood. This was the breaking point, not the moment she stopped calling, not even the moment she told me to stop. The breaking point was realizing that I had been holding on to an illusion, the illusion that motherhood never ends. But it does. Sometimes with death, sometimes with distance, and sometimes with words sharp enough to cut through decades of love. The tears came then, silent and unrelenting. They soaked the pillow as I buried my face in it, muffling the sound, not because I was ashamed, but because there was no one left to hear me cry. And in the stillness of that night, I whispered to myself what I had never dared say out loud. She doesn't need me anymore. The words broke me, but maybe, just maybe, they were the first step towards something else. The silence stretched on for days. I tried not to keep count, but every morning, when I checked the calendar, the marks told the truth. A week had passed, then 2. No calls, no messages. I told myself she was busy, that I had to be patient, but patience is a cruel thing when it feels like waiting for someone who's already gone. One Saturday morning, I made a decision. I would drive into the city, not to confront her, not to argue, but simply to see her face, to remind her, gently, quietly, that I was still here. I baked her favorite lemon loaf, the one she used to beg for as a child. I wrapped it carefully in foil, then slipped it into a paper bag. I added a small scarf I had knitted. Winter was approaching, and she always complained about the cold. The drive took 2 hours. My hands clenched the wheel tighter with every mile, my chest both heavy and hopeful. When I reached her apartment building, I sat in a car for a moment, staring up at the windows. I didn't know which one was hers anymore. She had moved here 2 years ago, and though I had visited once, she hadn't invited me back. Still, I gathered my courage and walked to the front door. The lobby smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. My reflection stared back at me from the glass doors, nervous and small. I pressed the buzzer for her apartment. My heart thudded. There was a pause, then a voice crackled through the speaker. "Hello?" "Anna, it's me," I said softly, trying to sound cheerful. "I was in a neighborhood, thought I'd stop by and bring you something." There was silence, then a sigh. "Mom, you can't just show up like this." I baked lemon loaf, your favorite, and I brought you a scarf I made. Just a quick visit, that's all. I won't stay long." Her voice grew sharper. "I told you, I have my own life now. You can't keep doing this. It's suffocating." The words stung worse than the phone call. At least on the phone, I could imagine her face softening, imagine she didn't really mean it. But here, her rejection pressed against me through the cold metal of the intercom. "I just miss you," I whispered. My throat ached. The line clicked. She had hung up. I stood there, bag in hand, trembling. Behind me, someone walked past, holding grocery bags, glancing curiously at the older woman standing frozen at the door. Heat rushed to my cheeks. Slowly, I set the bag down by the lobby door. I didn't know if she would pick it up or if some stranger would take it, but I couldn't carry it back with me. As I walked to the car, my legs felt heavy, as if each step carried the weight of years of love that no longer had a home. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. My vision blurred with tears. The city traffic moved around me, horns honking, engines roaring. But inside the car, it was just me and the echo of her words. "You can't keep doing this. It's suffocating." I had once been her safe place, her comfort, her everything. Now I was suffocating. The drive home felt endless. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want to drown out the silence. I wanted to feel it fully, to understand it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had set. I sat in the dark, unable to move. My house loomed ahead, empty and waiting. Inside, I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. The rejection cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just that she didn't want to see me. It was that she wanted me gone. That night, I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't pace by the window. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering to myself the truth I had tried so hard to avoid. She doesn't want me in her life. It was the kind of truth that shattered you. But also, in its sharpness, it left no room for denial. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward letting go. The rejection at Anna's door clung to me like a cold shadow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that lobby, heard the flat click of the intercom, felt the sting of her words. "You can't keep doing this. It's suffocating." For days, I moved through the house like a visitor in my own life. I cleaned surfaces that weren't dirty. I opened cabinets and stared at shelves without remembering what I needed. I wandered from room to room, waiting for something, anything, to feel different. But nothing did. Until one afternoon, while dusting the bookshelf, I found a stack of old documents. Birth certificates, insurance policies, bank statements. And there, tucked neatly in a folder, my will. I sat at the little things I had saved with care. It was all written in her name, Anna. Even after the phone calls, even after the rejection at her door, even after she told me I was suffocating, I had still planned to leave her everything. The realization made my chest tighten. How had I become so willing to erase myself, to give everything I had to someone who no longer wanted me? My hand trembled, but not with weakness, with resolve. That night I called Mr. Jenkins, the lawyer who had handled my husband's estate years ago. His voice was steady, professional. "Of course we can update your will, Mrs. Carter. Would you like to schedule an appointment?" "Yes," I said firmly, "as soon as possible." When I arrived at his office the next week, the air smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Mr. Jenkins adjusted his glasses, pen poised. "So, who would you like to name as your beneficiary?" I paused, the questions settling over me like a challenge. Not Anna. Not anymore. I'd like to leave the house and my savings, I said slowly, to Emily, my neighbor's daughter. Mr. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. Emily, the teenager who helps you with groceries sometimes? Yes, I said, my voice steady. She's shown me more kindness in the past year than my own child has in 5. She checks in, she listens, she laughs with me, she makes me feel seen. He nodded, writing carefully. And your personal items, jewelry, heirlooms? I thought of the locket with David's picture, the quilt I'd made, the books I had loved. I want them divided among friends here, people who've stood beside me, people who will value them. As the pen scratched across paper, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't vengeance. This wasn't punishment. This was reclamation. For so long I had believed my worth depended on Anna's love, that everything I had, love doesn't mean rewarding neglect. Love means giving to where it grows. When the papers were signed, I slipped my copy into my bag. My heart felt lighter, as if I had closed a door that had been left open too long. On the drive home, I passed a park where children were playing. I pulled over and watched for a while, memories washing over me. Anna, had once laughed like that, carefree, full of wonder. I didn't regret loving her, I never would, but I regretted giving her the power to erase me. Back at home, I placed the updated will in a drawer with my journal, the same journal where I had spilled my grief, my questions, my memories. Now, alongside those words, lay proof that I had chosen something different. That night, I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't check the window. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, poured myself a glass of wine, and whispered aloud. I may have lost her, but I will not lose myself. The words echoed softly in the empty house, not as sorrow, but as defiance. And in that defiance, I felt something new stirring. Not anger, not bitterness, but strength. The kind of strength that comes when you realize silence doesn't have to be your prison. It can be your freedom. After the will was rewritten, something inside me settled. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. The phone still sat silent most days. The house was still too big, too quiet. But the ache that had hollowed me out began to shift into something else. Resolve. I realized one morning, while pouring coffee, that I hadn't checked my phone in 2 days. The old me would have panicked, certain I had missed a call, desperate to see Anna's name on the screen. But now, I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the steam warm my face, and thought, if she calls, she calls. If she doesn't, I'll still be here. That thought was more liberating than I expected. The next step came unexpectedly. I was leaving the grocery store when I noticed a flyer pinned to the bold letters announced, Senior Dance Class. Beginners welcome. I almost laughed. Me? Dancing? The last time I had danced was with David in the kitchen, decades ago, swaying to an old Sinatra record. But something about the flyer tugged at me. The following Thursday, I walked into the recreation center, heart pounding. The room smelled faintly of wood polish, the floor gleaming under fluorescent lights. A dozen people milled about, some couples, some singles. A tall man with salt and pepper hair adjusted the music player, announcing cheerfully, "No experience required." I hesitated at the door, clutching my purse. Then a woman about my age, wearing bright red sneakers, waved me over. "First time?" she asked with a grin. "Yes," I admitted, my cheeks warming. "Don't worry. We'll step on each other's toes together." Her name was Carol. Within minutes, she had me laughing at my own clumsy footwork. The music was upbeat, lively. My body felt stiff at first, but as the songs played on, I loosened, swaying, turning, even stumbling with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. By the end of the class, my face ached from smiling. For the first time in a long time, I had done something purely for myself. The weeks that followed took on a new rhythm. Thursdays became dance nights. Carol and I started meeting for coffee afterward, sharing stories about our lives, her divorce, my widowhood, our children who had drifted away in their own ways. We laughed about our aches and pains, but we also laughed at ourselves, at life, at the absurdity of feeling invisible one moment and alive the next. I also began attending a book club at the library. At first I went just to listen, sitting quietly while others debated characters and themes. But one evening, I offered an opinion, tentative, uncertain, and the group listened. They nodded. They agreed. Instead of waiting by the phone, I cooked new recipes, played old records, even tried painting once, though the result was more abstract mess than masterpiece. The house still echoed, but it was no longer with loneliness. It was with the sound of a life filling itself again. One Saturday afternoon, as I sorted through old boxes in the attic, I found a stack of photo albums. Pages of Anna's childhood stared back at me. Birthday parties, vacations, first days of school. My heart squeezed, but I didn't crumble. I whispered to the photos, "I loved you with everything I had." Then I closed the album gently and set it aside. Love, I realized, didn't vanish because it wasn't returned. Love remained, like sunlight on an empty porch, warming even when no one steps outside to feel it. At the next dance class, Carol nudged me and said, "You look lighter these days." "I suppose I am," I said, smiling faintly. Because it was true. I had stopped measuring my days by whether Anna called. I had stopped waiting for love to return like a lost package. I had started living again. And in that new rhythm of music, of friendship, of laughter, I found something even better than what I had lost. I found myself. It had been months since the last time I'd heard Anna's voice. By then, the silence no longer crushed me. My days had shape. Dance classes, book club, coffee with Carol, afternoons in the garden pulling weeds and planting tulips. The phone still sat on the kitchen counter, but it was no longer an altar, just a tool, just an object. So when it rang one Tuesday afternoon, I didn't rush to it. I was in the middle of kneading bread dough, my hands sticky with flour. By the time I wiped them clean and walked over, the ringing had stopped. I checked the screen. Anna. My breath caught, but only for a moment. For years, that name flashing on the screen would have sent me spinning. Wiped the counter and returned to my dough. If it mattered, she'd call again. And she did. An hour later, the phone buzzed once more. This time, I answered. "Mom?" Her voice was softer than before, hesitant. "Yes, Anna," I said calmly. There was a pause. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has." Another pause. I could hear traffic in the background, the muffled sound of city life. "Listen," she said finally, her voice shifting into the brisk, practical tone I knew too well. "I'm in a bit of a bind. My rent went up, and with work being unpredictable, things are tight. I was wondering if you could help me out, just for a few months." I stood still, phone pressed to my ear. For a moment, the old instinct tugged at me, the reflex to give, to rescue, to smooth the path ahead of her, the instinct of a mother. But then I remembered the intercom at her apartment, the sharpness of her voice. "You can't keep doing this. It's suffocating." And I remembered the journal, the will, the laughter at dance class, the way Carol and I had stumbled through a waltz until we nearly fell over laughing. I remembered the life I had built in her absence. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said softly. "So you'll help?" Relief flickered in her voice. "No," I said. Silence. "What do you mean, no?" she demanded, her tone rising. "I mean I stopped waiting for your calls months ago. I stopped waiting for your love, and I won't trade my peace for your convenience now." Her breath caught audibly. "Mom, I didn't mean what I said before. I was stressed. Anna, I interrupted gently but firmly. You told me I was suffocating you. I listened. I stepped back. I built a life without leaning on your voice. I won't go back to being invisible just to make things easier for you. She tried again, her tone shifting, pleading. But you're my mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I closed my eyes. The ache was, it means I raised you the best I knew how. But it doesn't mean I have to let you use me when it's convenient. The silence on the line stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, she muttered, I can't believe this. I know, I said quietly. Neither can I. And then, for the first time in my life, I ended the call before she could. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, the phone heavy in my hand. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was freedom. I placed the phone back on the counter and returned to my bread dough. I pressed my hands into it, folding, shaping, steady. As the dough rose in the oven, the smell filled the house. Warm, comforting, alive. And I realized something. I had been waiting for her voice to fill the hollow spaces of my life. But now, those spaces were already full. Full of music, full of laughter, full of stories, full of me. The call had come too late. And that, I decided, was not a tragedy. It was the proof that I had finally learned how to live without waiting. After that call, something settled in me. Not bitterness, not triumph, just a calm certainty. I had closed a door, gently but firmly, and behind it was the version of me who had lived waiting for scraps of affection. That woman was gone. The next morning, when Carol picked me up for dance class, she glanced at me as we buckled our seatbelts. You look different, she said. I smiled faintly. Maybe I am. The music at the community center was lively that evening. A new instructor had us learning a cha-cha, and the room buzzed with laughter as feet tangled and rhythms went astray. I moved clumsily at first, but with each beat, I loosened. I even caught myself laughing so hard that my even made plans to meet at the farmer's market on Saturday. I realized, sitting there with them, that I hadn't felt this kind of belonging in years. It wasn't forced. It wasn't conditional. It was simply people choosing to be with each other. No demands, no obligations. Saturday came, and true to our word, we met at the market. The air was crisp, stalls filled with apples, pumpkins, jars of honey. We strolled together, sampling cheeses, sipping cider, laughing at Carol's exaggerated haggling with a vendor. I bought a bouquet of sunflowers and tucked them into my basket. As we sat on a bench eating fresh pastries, Linda said, "It's funny, isn't it? At this stage in life, you think the circle is closing. Children grown, routines fixed. But then," she gestured around us, "you find new people, new joys. Like the circle was never closing at all. It was just opening somewhere else." Her words struck me. For so long I had believed my circle began and ended with Anna. But here, surrounded by friends, with laughter bubbling from somewhere deep and unforced, I saw the truth. Circles can expand, hearts can stretch, and love can take root in unexpected places. The weeks flowed into one another, each filled with new rhythms. Dance on Thursdays, book club on Tuesdays, weekend coffee with Carol and Linda. Sometimes we went to the park, sometimes to small concerts in town. The house was still quiet when I came home at night, but now the silence felt peaceful, not punishing. One evening after book club, I lingered in the parking lot with a man named Robert. He was a retired teacher, tall, with a gentle manner. We had spoken a few times before, but this evening the conversation flowed easily, about literature, travel dreams, even the loneliness of losing a spouse. When he asked if I'd like to join him at home that night, I sat with my journal. The pages were nearly full now, words spilling across lines in shaky but determined handwriting. I flipped back to the beginning, to the entries written in grief, desperation, loneliness. Then I turned to the fresh page and wrote, I thought I was suffocating her, but really, I was suffocating myself, by living only for her. Now I am breathing again. The ink bled slightly into the paper, but the words felt strong, solid. The next week, at dance class, Carol looked at me and said, You know, I think we've all changed since you came. You bring something into the room, a kind of quiet strength. I shook my head, embarrassed. I don't know about that. But Linda leaned in, her eyes warm. She's right. You remind us it's never too late to start over. Their words stayed with me. For years I had been invisible, reduced to a phone call answered with impatience. Now here I was, seen, valued, even admired. I hadn't expected it, I hadn't planned it, but somehow, in losing what I thought I couldn't live without, I had found everything I needed. That night, as I slipped between the sheets, I whispered to the darkness, not as a plea, but as gratitude, thank you. For the laughter, for the friendships, for the second chance at life. The circle was no longer empty. It was full. And so was I. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I realized just how far I had come. The house was still, sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. I brewed a pot of tea, sliced fresh bread I'd baked the night before, and carried it out to the porch. The garden stretched before me, tulips swaying gently in the breeze, sunflowers tilting their golden faces toward the light. I used to sit here waiting for the phone to ring. Every sound, every vibration had once pulled me toward it like across the street. Emily, the neighbor's daughter, rode her bike, waving as she passed. She had grown taller, her laughter carrying in the morning air. I waved back, my heart swelling with a fondness I no longer tried to suppress. I thought about the will tucked safely away in my drawer, about how I had chosen to leave my legacy to kindness, not neglect, about how love, when freely given and received, multiplies. That decision no longer felt like defiance. It felt like truth. Later that day, I met Carol and Linda for brunch at a little cafe by the river. We sat outside, the water sparkling under the sunlight, plates filled with pancakes and strawberries. Robert joined us, bringing flowers he had picked from his garden. We laughed until our stomachs ached, sharing stories, teasing one another like old friends. As I looked around the table, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Belonging. Not the kind tied to blood or obligation, but the kind freely chosen, freely given. When I returned home, there was a voicemail waiting on my phone. Anna's voice, strained. Mom, I don't know what to say. I guess I miss you. I wish things were different. I listened once, twice, then set the phone down. My heart tightened, but the ache didn't consume me, because I understood now. She might never come back. She might never see me the way I once longed for her to, and that was no longer my cage. I stepped outside again, journal in hand, and settled onto the porch swing. The last pages waited, blank, inviting. Slowly, I began to write. I once lived in silence, waiting for her to remember me. But in the end, I remembered myself first. I found music in laughter, warmth in friendship, and peace in letting go. I stopped waiting for a call that might never come, and in that choice, I found freedom. My story. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft gold. I breathed deeply, the air cool and clean, and let a small smile curve my lips. This wasn't the ending I had imagined years ago. No happy reunion, no miraculous change of heart. But it was better. It was mine. The quiet freedom of no longer waiting, the joy of choosing myself, the strength of knowing that even when love leaves, life still blooms. And as the evening settled gently around me, I whispered into the fading light, I'm free.